Welcome to the Digital Gold Podcast. Today, I have Matt Prusak, who is the president of American Bitcoin, a NASDAQ-listed company focused on one clear mandate, maximizing Bitcoin per share. At ABTC, he leads strategy and execution across mining, treasury, and ecosystem development, guiding the company's mission to harness abundant U.S. energy resources and transform them into computing power that secures the Bitcoin network. Matt, I'm glad to have you on the show.
Great to be here, JP.
So tell me, when was the first time you got into Bitcoin mining and what intrigued you about this space?
Sure, yeah. So my background, actually, I started out as a management consultant. So I was on the infrastructure side, financial infrastructure, and had spent a lot of time around the world working with clients on what they called distributed ledger technology, which obviously became blockchain, the programmable money thesis. But the more places I went, the more I started to see these different fiat currencies, each trading around, doing kind of what the whim of the central bank was in a given market. And I got more and more to the Bitcoin story. And so found myself getting passionate about what Bitcoin represented for folks that wanted a safe store of value around the world. On the infrastructure front, after COVID, I built a very large COVID testing company with some partners, and we built healthcare infrastructure around the United States. And so when the opportunity came to start building very, very large Bitcoin mining infrastructure, it was a tremendous way to apply that skill set to a topic I was immensely passionate about.
Nice. And so you started at US Bitcoin Corp, and what were you doing there?
Yes. So at US Bitcoin Corp, I was the chief commercial officer. So I worked closely with my partners, Mike Ho and Asher Canute, on building out one of the largest private Bitcoin mining companies. So we did everything from self-mining. We did some hosting operations as well, but we were in the weeds, right? So we developed a very accurate assessment of what made a good site run. And that gave us a good sense of operational discipline and results delivery when it came time to go to the institutional level.
And then what was the shift for you between Bitcoin Corp to Ionic Digital? What was the jump there? And then kind of like what similarities do you see moving from Ionic to ABTC? Would love to hear that perspective.
American Bitcoin, to rewind the story back to the US Bitcoin days, basically we had US Bitcoin Corp merge with Hut 8. So this was a very large merger between a public and private Bitcoin miner in the space. I then joined Hut 8 as their chief commercial officer, running operations there. In that process, around the same time, Celsius, it used to be effectively a very large financial services company in the crypto industry, had gone bankrupt. And in the bankruptcy, there was a pile of hundreds of millions of dollars worth of machines that needed to be turned on, right? This is what we called the machines in boxes problem, the MIB problem. And my role in that transition was to step in as the CEO of Ionic, separate from Hut 8, separate from US Bitcoin Corp, and execute that turnaround. So I stepped out of the Hut 8 seat, went over to Ionic. Now, Ionic had, for a period of time, a operational relationship with Hut 8. So I was now working with some of my old colleagues, albeit from the Ionic chair, to deliver a very, very large sort of trophy asset site called Cedar Vale in Texas. And so I worked with the Ionic team, which we built alongside the Hut 8 team, which was doing a lot of the operational work to develop their Cedar Vale location for Ionic. So I did that for the better part of a year. We got that site cash flowing. Ultimately, I stepped away, took some time off. And then when the opportunity came to kick off American Bitcoin with my team from Hut 8, along with Eric Trump, I leapt at the opportunity, and here we are.
So Eric comes to you, he says, let's do American Bitcoin, or what is the initial starting of American Bitcoin, and why does Hut 8 see the need to separate it from their Bitcoin mining operations into a new venture? Why would Hut 8 want to give up their Bitcoin mining?
So if you think about Bitcoin accumulation in 2025, there's really two layers that are now at play. First is the mining. So mining was the original way that folks got Bitcoin for less than market price. Typically you or I could go in Coinbase or whatnot, we could buy spot. But if you wanted to accumulate Bitcoin with sort of a premium to your effort, mining was the path to do so. Now, to do so, you needed tremendous energy, knowledge of infrastructure. There's a whole host of skills that go into Bitcoin mining these days to really produce Bitcoin at a profit. So Hut 8 had that infrastructure in place. They had the skills. Hut 8 has the team. But what would be very interesting for Hut 8 would be to pull apart the mining assets and put that into its own publicly traded ticker, right? So if you think about it, Hut 8 has become a very vast company. It controls energy assets in Canada, high performance computing, the Bitcoin mining venture. They have $1 billion worth of Bitcoin on the balance sheet. Hut 8 is a pretty sizable enterprise. So when we went out to the market, it became a great opportunity for us to take the Bitcoin mining machines, now not the literal substations and the transformers, but we took the machines, the firepower, right? That's about 25 exahash today. We took that and we wanted to pull that into a new corporate vehicle that would be solely focused on Bitcoin accumulation. It's a win-win. Hut 8 is able to help us acquire Bitcoin cheaper than most through really efficient use of energy, mining at a lower cost than almost anyone else in the world. This gives us an immense structural discount. We're then able to use Hut 8's infrastructure to become backbone of America's Bitcoin ecosystem here in the US. And obviously, as Bitcoin becomes this global store of value, it is critical that the USA becomes central to that process. So we're able to do so from here at home. And then finally, that Hut 8 relationship, again, just gives us a unique way to win, right? It vertically integrates us without the heavy costs that you would come with us building out our own capital expenditures on substations and transformers. So we get the same economic advantages that this had inside of Hut, but we're faster and we're leaner and we're able to get more Bitcoin at a cheaper price.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned it before that your mandate is maximizing Bitcoin per share. Can you define that exact formula for investors and what behaviors it's going to discourage? So I think one of the biggest things that has hurt miners in the past is that bloated SG&A costs as a public company, that now the investors are kind of losing confidence that this is actually a Bitcoin accumulation vehicle. So what is American Bitcoin doing differently?
Definitely. So American Bitcoin is built to specialize in Bitcoin per share growth. If you were starting a brand new Bitcoin accumulation vehicle in 2025, you'd want to pull the best of the mining companies and the best of the treasury companies. And American Bitcoin has both. So on the mining side, you mentioned something about how a lot of the peers in mining had over time increased SG&A. Now, there's a variety of reasons this could happen. Companies could have gone into research in new topics. They could have strayed, frankly, from the Bitcoin mining mission. But we came in here with Bitcoin as our North Star, right? And so everything really drives back to Bitcoin per share. So if you think about the SG&A, because we have a relationship with Hut, we're able to take a lot of those roles and put them outside of our company. We're very lean at American Bitcoin. We can run American Bitcoin with less than 5 full-time employees, right? All the money that we raise, all the revenue that we generate, everything is geared towards Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining versus other projects.
And so when you have this Bitcoin per share metric, how is that superior compared to hash rate, fleet exahash, your maybe margin to mine a Bitcoin, the hash price? Why is this the singular focus versus some of these other core metrics that Bitcoin mining companies throw around?
American Bitcoin is a Bitcoin accumulator. So we have mining's great. Hash rate and cost of hash, that's a North Star in mining. So those are important to us, right? We do look at, obviously, it's a huge competitive advantage for us to make sure that our energy costs are great, that our team is lean, and that we're not putting money into anything other than the exahash on the mining side, right? Now, that being said, these days you have more than just mining in the Bitcoin industry. You've got ETFs and you have treasury companies. So the ETFs are an interesting inclusion into the Bitcoin investment opportunity ecosystem, right? With ETFs, you had a means for folks, the everyday American, to gain a one-to-one exposure to the Bitcoin network for their investment. That's great for people that want to just leave it, right, and have some exposure to the hardest asset. But we don't think that's the best way to gain exposure. The best way to gain exposure is to have someone who's out there accumulating Bitcoin on your behalf. But that's not only going to be through mining. So the mining is, of course, important. It's a way to get Bitcoin at the structural discount. But there's also the treasury side. And so to explain the treasury side a bit, what we're building there is a company that is able to harness the volatility in the public markets that comes from having a mining business, that comes from having a Bitcoin stack. And we're able to effectively trade around that and amass capital that is all routed into Bitcoin as well. That is more than what we make in terms of mining, right? So the mining generates a steady stream of Bitcoin at a structural discount to the market, and we do so every day. On the other hand, we're able to run these financial vehicles that allow us to accumulate Bitcoin at spot. So on one hand, I've got a lever that is mining. On the other hand, I've got a lever that is blending down the cost of spot, right? Or rather adding in increased Bitcoin from a treasury standpoint, giving everyday investors exposure to both of these two engines, right? And we believe that if you want exposure to Bitcoin and you want that exposure to grow, it makes sense to work with an accumulator like American Bitcoin. Now, if you want to use a treasury strategy, we have that. If you're more in the mining ethos, that's something we do well as well.
And so that $2.1 billion that you guys recently raised, how are you going to allocate it if you've already disclosed that across treasury and mining? Or how do you view allocation in general on, let's say, $1 billion of capital, hypothetically?
As a low cost company, we can use the capital markets to buy Bitcoin directly. Now we've got a lower cost of capital than we would have had as a private company. We have a $2.1 billion financial instrument that you've referenced that allows us to tap the markets for Bitcoin directly or go out and buy machines. So every day we're really looking at what is the opportunity in hash price, what is the opportunity in firepower that we get from mining, and then what is the equivalent amount of Bitcoin that we could buy if we were just going to the market. And so we're attentive to the dynamics here. There are going to be quarters, days, weeks, months where it makes sense for us to simply buy spot, because that is something we believe is the cleanest way to gain further exposure to Bitcoin. There will be other times where mining makes sense, right? Building that fleet out further, maybe go from 25 exahash to 30, 40, 50, beyond. We're able to do that very rapidly, again, because we have that unique relationship with Hut 8, which gives us the ability to grow our energy pipeline and our infrastructure assets in response to demand we get for growth. Today, right now, we're focused on Bitcoin. We just did a tremendous deal that allowed us to grow our fleet size to about 25 exahash. This has put us in the top echelon of miners. We're out there producing coins and securing the network the same as everyone else. But we're also now looking at the accumulation side via the treasury. And so that is where my focus is today.
And so, Matt, if we're thinking about the treasury and mining aspect of the business, when Bitcoin miners are physical derivatives of Bitcoin and Bitcoin's price, right? They're extracting so much Bitcoin from the network. One thing that we know from being in this space is that as Bitcoin price increases and in a rapid succession in these bull markets, the machines can actually increase in value. But then vice versa, when Bitcoin price is really low, the machines are going to be potentially much lower and have a discounted value. When are you deciding to go Bitcoin miners versus just buying Bitcoin directly, knowing that if the price is high, you're going to be buying machines over price, but if the price is low, it's better to maybe just to buy the Bitcoin at that time because you're going to get more of it than the miner could have ever gotten, even though the machines are, let's say, underpriced.
I understand. American Bitcoin is positioned in such a way as to take advantage of the countercyclical nature of Bitcoin. We've been in this industry now for a while. We've seen the booms, we've seen the busts, and we are still here. And that's because we have a fairly disciplined approach to risk, right? And to capital investment. And so if you look at past cycles, there is a euphoria. I think we are all long-term believers in Bitcoin. We all believe that Bitcoin is on a steady ascent to a much higher value. I'd say, again, gold is at 21 trillion. Bitcoin is around roughly 2. There's a lot of headroom, even on just gold. And I think Bitcoin has more to offer the world than gold does. There's a lot of headroom for Bitcoin as an asset. That being said, it is quite likely Bitcoin takes the scenic route to get there, right? So there will be times where Bitcoin goes up. There will be times where Bitcoin goes down. And if you are over levered, as you put it, in any given direction, that could very negatively impact your operations. So as American Bitcoin thinks about how to grow or stack or grow our fleet responsibly, we are very attentive to not overpaying for things. Right? If you've seen the past few quarters, there have been other folks in the mining industry that have chased headline growth, that have chased a very high exahash number and declare themselves the champion. And you know what? I'm okay with folks being the biggest number. I don't have to be the biggest number. I just need to be the best miner. We need to be the miner that, from our perspective, is producing Bitcoin with the best structural advantage that you can have in the industry, and then use that to help accumulate. It's one of our two wheels. We have the accumulation through the mining, we have the accumulation through the treasury. But on the mining side, you can't get ahead by overpaying. You can get a sugar rush from a headline, from a massive fleet expansion, but to win long-term, you really have to be thoughtful about the ups and the downs of the cycle. So to give one example, for a long period of time, we were getting pitched heavily on flipping from a forced air cooling or fan model of mining into liquid cooling. I think that liquid cooling in various forms, there's immersion, there's water cooled, there's direct to chip. There is a tremendous amount of opportunity, but it had to be at the right time. And so as we sat around and we decided what would make sense for us and when would it make sense for us to make the jump from the forced air cooling towards liquid, we waited. And the American Bitcoin, or at the time Hut 8 and US Bitcoin, we were under a lot of pressure to put out a release to say that we were going to be a liquid cooled company and we were doing this. But at the end of the day, I've always been of the opinion that the early bird gets the worm, but the second mouse gets the cheese. And so we were really trying to make sure that when it came time to do that purchase, that everything was ready to go, that we would get what we were paying for, that we were not anyone's guinea pig, and we would grow the business accordingly.
I love that because you're seeing these immersion and hydro miners cost a lot more. and don't have as good capital paybacks as, let's say, the air-cooled devices. So what is the relationship with ABTC and Hut 8 in terms of hosting costs if it's public, operational SLAs you're holding them to, scalability? Like, do you have a first right of refusal on the space that Hut 8 is building out? Can you talk a little bit more in detail about that relationship?
Yes. Hut 8's advantage for American Bitcoin cannot be understated. So the ABTC partnership with HUD gives us benefits of a few kinds, right? There's the back office benefits, corporate benefits, shared resources on a team level. There's an energy pipeline benefit. And then in the middle, there's operational benefits, right? Once you've got a site up and running, keeping it going at maximal efficiency. The way that has been structured is somewhat of a sibling company relationship. Right now, Hut 8 owns a majority of the shares in American Bitcoin. We are freely trading. We have shares out in the market. Folks can take part in the American Bitcoin story directly. They don't need to go through Hut. They can buy shares in American Bitcoin directly through the brokerage. But we have a tightly integrated relationship with that company. And what that means from a cost perspective is that we are working with them in a structure that gives them somewhat of a managed services agreement for the energy. They're given a small fraction of sort of the overall revenue as a fee for running the site. Now, they're incentivized as a partner organization. They're incentivized to charge us a fair amount of money. We've not disclosed the specific figures. Of course, we're public, so you'll see more details around the nature of that relationship as we go through our disclosure processes. But that relationship is fair, but is value creating. What I mean by that is that for Hut 8, American Bitcoin is the best partner you can have. We are a customer of first resort, right? If you had a site and they're an energy infrastructure expert, if they have a site at Hut 8 that could be ultimately used for AI, maybe not today, but maybe longer term, it increased things the site would need to get there, fiber redundancy, power redundancy. It just doesn't have the fit and finish for hyperscaler, but it's got a great energy opportunity. American Bitcoin is first in line, right, for that sort of opportunity. We are I come from the company, come from the sector. We are working hand in hand with the team at Hut 8 to develop opportunities that could be to the maximal benefit of American Bitcoin and have that benefit ultimately flow through to the Hut 8 organization as well. So again, I would basically split the relationship into three components. There's a development relationship, and Hut 8 has a pipeline in the gigawatts, so there's plenty to develop together. There is a operational relationship. So Hut 8 making sure that these machines, which are liquid cooled, are well maintained and processing at full speed, and are really getting that efficiency advantage that puts us ahead of our peers in the Bitcoin mining category. And then finally, there's a shared services agreement for corporate services. And this is a way for us to keep the headcount very low at American Bitcoin, which means that for our treasury operations, you don't have a cast of thousands stapled to a Bitcoin treasury, right? You've got mostly Satoshis in there, and then a few staff like myself making sure that the trains are on time.
And so, Matt, I guess digging into it, do you see yourself having most favored nation status with Hut 8 as the CEO of American Bitcoin? Or do you think that you'll be treated like any of their other large customers?
I think it is a special relationship. It is a special relationship that's been codified in contracts. We've got a great governance setup where there are two independent boards, right? So there is an independent board at Hut 8 that is looking at a lot of these big deals from the Hut 8 side. There's an independent board, or there's a board with several fairly senior independent directors at the American Bitcoin side that is assessing the same deals. So you've got two sets of board, you've got management, and then you've got a deal. And so as we think about ways to work together, this is a situation where, of course, we've got the paper in place, we can grow and we can scale, and we will. There are so many folks looking at these contracts that I would really want to stress that these are deals that are to the advantage for both companies, right? American Bitcoin's goal is to build the Bitcoin infrastructure backbone in the United States. Hut 8 is a brilliant infrastructure partner to do that, and we can work together.
Yeah, and I think they're a great partner to scale, and we've seen them grow. So let's jump into actually getting the deal done. So you guys have this idea of creating American Bitcoin. How do you identify Griffin Mining as a company to merge with? How are negotiations with their board? And how does it come out where you guys have the deal that you actually get, which is where they own a very small percentage of Griffin and you guys own a larger group? And then kind of what's happened to the assets, the S19s that Griffin owned previously and were hosted? And do you have plans to retire those, or have they already been retired? Can you talk more about those details and just trying to show the audience what goes into putting together one of these large transactions, and how do you go from private idea to public company in such a short order?
American Bitcoin has always been geared towards giving the public markets an accessible way and a trustworthy way to gain exposure to the Bitcoin ecosystem, right? On the path to a public listing, there were a few key steps that needed to take place. First was the launch of the American Bitcoin vehicle. So this meant pulling it out of Hut 8 as a separate company. Right? So we started with about 10 exahash of Hut 8 machines that were put into the American Bitcoin vehicle. We combined that with the management team. We combined that with Eric Trump as chief strategy officer. We created this NewCo that would serve as the way to get the public more invested in the American Bitcoin story. Second to that, we needed to find the proper partner to go into the public markets, right? So if we wanted to be publicly accessible, we needed to work with a company that we could get a deal done that would be beneficial to our shareholders, that would make sense for their team, that would be ideally NASDAQ listed, public markets listed, that would give retail and institutional investors confidence in the final company. And as you think about Griffin, which was ultimately our target, there was also a nice synergy because this was a team that knew mining. Right? We've seen in the space a lot of mergers between asset companies and whatever girls left at the ball, right, to try and get things going for a Bitcoin treasury company. This is slightly different from our approach, right? We were working with a team that knew mining inside and out, that had a good sense of the Bitcoin accumulation, and so we were able to come to terms on a deal fairly rapidly, right? So from the day we launched, which was April 1st, 2025, to the day we listed, formally closed the deal, et cetera, which was September 3rd, about 5 months, 2 days, Griffin presented a terrific counterparty to get that deal done. So we sat down with the team, we negotiated a split. So they received a piece of the float of the final company once we were able to become public. But by and large, this was a collaborative exercise. You'd mentioned what happened to some of their assets, right? So that has been worked through, and you'll see as we get through our disclosure processes and things like that, you'll find out the ultimate fate of a lot of their infrastructure and their equipment. They had some mining assets that we are accounting for, and we're going to work on how to make sure that our shareholders receive the maximum amount of upside for those investments. And yeah, I really express my gratitude, right, to the Hut 8 and Griffin teams and the American Bitcoin teams. There were a lot of parties involved with this to get a deal done.
And I guess what was the main learnings that you took from the Ionic Digital deal to this new deal with Griffin? Was it being on a NASDAQ listed exchange versus pink sheets was a huge thing? Like, what else there comes to mind that really made you guys do it differently and made it obviously successful?
Traditional capital markets in the United States gives you a lot of tools in the toolbox, right? There's public listings, there's S1s, S3s, S4s, Form 10s, there's RTOs, there's SPACs. There are a lot of tools in the toolbox in the capital markets in the United States. Now you layer DeFi on top of that. You've got token generation events, and you've got launch pads, and you've got all sorts of different ways in the DeFi ecosystem to also tap into the capital markets. And the chaos theory spirals into some fantastic and interesting combinations. At the end of the day, though, for us, our mission is very simple. It's give the everyday American exposure to Bitcoin as an asset class in a way that accumulates Bitcoin. So a public listing for us made sense from day one. This is the bridge between TradFi and DeFi. On the TradFi side, there's enormous pools of Americans who are interested in Bitcoin. They're hearing about it. They are curious about its role in the digital economy from an assets perspective, from a gold perspective, but they're not yet setting up Coinbase accounts. They're not creating wallets. They're not going out there. They're not bridging into tokens. They're not ready for that, or they're not interested in it, and they don't need the hassle or the headache. So the traditional capital markets for what we were trying to do made a lot of sense. However, if we were going to go into traditional capital markets, we needed to do so in a way that would convey the level of confidence and responsibility that we have in our business, right? So using best-in-class auditors, working with all sorts of folks to tell the story in public documents that are out and available now to really help get institutional investors confident in the American Bitcoin story, it makes all the difference. One thing that I believe made it so important for us to go through this process this way is that institutional adoption narrative, right? Retail, the average investor has kind of come around on Bitcoin, right? That would either they were early, or I think we're still early, but they're more recently involved in crypto assets. But the institutional crowd for the past while has not really gained much exposure. I think they've wised up to it. They're attending events. I'm meeting with sovereign wealth funds, family offices, buy-side hedge funds, pensions, RIAs. These are really thoughtful capital allocators, and they are coming around to the Bitcoin story, and they want to gain exposure. And so for us to have a simple NASDAQ listed vehicle with a means of articulating how we are accumulating Satoshis per share, Bitcoin per share, they love it. They love that confidence. They love the idea of a company where they say, hey, In a way, Bitcoin mining, part of our business, has lemonade stand economics. All right, this is a power in, coins out operational business. We can get our minds around that. Your dollar cost averaging, your Bitcoin makes a lot of sense for us, right? On the treasury side, a lot of our more sophisticated investors, they understand that the roles of volatility, volume, liquidity, having a ticker, what that means, quarterly disclosures, fair disclosures. They like that side as well. And so when you combine this very simple lemonade stand economics business with exposure to Bitcoin as an asset class growing a double-digit percentage every year, you can see why institutions are excited about American Bitcoin.
And will you be putting out guidance on the ATM usage? Because I know if your goal is to accumulate as much Bitcoin as possible, MicroStrategy did a good job with MNAV and disclosing when they're going to use the ATM. Do you guys plan on doing something similar?
Yes, we do plan on doing lots of disclosures surrounding our activities. I think that's a pro of being public. They talk about the reporting headaches and the stuff that comes from being public. It's all very real. There's a lot of paperwork if you want to go down this path. But for us, there's also a lot of opportunity to be transparent. And so one of the main ways that we're going to be transparent is announcing a lot of our buys, right? And so you can see from our purchase pattern, the continued confidence. Obviously, we're long-term holders. We're not selling a single Satoshi. We never have, by the way, sold a single Satoshi, right? So we're long-term holders of Bitcoin. We're going to channel sort of the energies of the capital markets into that accumulation. We're going to be very public about those buys, whether it's on the mining side, the operations, what we're doing, why we're doing it, giving that rationale, speaking with folks like yourself about the story behind those operations, or on the treasury side, why we're buying Bitcoin, what makes this the hardest asset in the world, what our tempo is for those buys. We have the technology to do them. We have both the operational acumen to win, and now we have the financial tools in the toolbox to capture some of that value. And we are going to use these instruments, right? In fact, we're already in the markets. We're already trying to think about what is the way to accumulate as much Bitcoin as efficiently as possible today.
And as you're thinking about those ways, when would you not grow your hash rate, even if capital is available?
For us, growing hash rate comes back to rate of return versus buying Bitcoin directly, right? There will be times where it makes sense to focus on hash rate. There will be times where it makes sense to focus on Bitcoin. So if you think about hash rate globally, there's been a steady ascent of difficulty. It's gone up, it's gone down in different periods, but directionally, more hash rate is entering the market. For us, though, the operational complexity of Bitcoin mining is fine. It's something we grew up with. It's something that we have a lot of skill with. We've got great relationships with all of the chip manufacturers worldwide. We have a great sense of what makes for a good Bitcoin mining site. And so we're going to be opportunistic. There are times where, to your point, if Bitcoin climbs rapidly, there's going to be some interesting opportunities on the machine side to try and capture some of that growth, right? If you think back to the halving, right, there was a few days sort of surrounding that event where transaction fee volume spiked. It was a really great opportunity to be a miner in that case, right? We were effectively exposed to what I view as the future Swift network, right? To this transaction of values on the block space. It is still early days. You're not seeing massive use of the block space yet, but to me, that block space presents opportunity. Miners will gain a lot of the opportunity that comes from that block space gaining value. And so for mining, we're very attentive. Now, to your point, what about a down cycle? Right? What happens, when the tide goes out? That's where historically our team has always excelled. If you look at the track record of the Hut 8 team, and before that, when we were the US Bitcoin Corp team, we've always excelled at, kind of swimming against the tide in those moments because we're high conviction. When everyone else says, oh, you're an expert in the industry, how many times have you seen headlines declaring the death of Bitcoin, right? I mean, this is something that you see the headlines, folks have their confidence shaken, they put down their tools and they go home, and you stand firm and you plant your feet and you think very thoughtfully about what you're doing and why you're doing it. And you see an opportunity in that crisis. And so when we've been faced with these decisions in the past, we've always stepped up to the occasion. And so going forward, if there'll be other times where there are folks over levered, right? Too much debt, too large an operation too soon, things like that, we can come in as a steady hand and we can find ways to create value out of those opportunities. In Bitcoin mining, there have been plenty of times in the past where there have been bad deals with good bones. But our team has always been very attentive to finding ways to turn those around and make the best of them.
And I would agree with you. You guys have done a great job growing and, succeeding in these bear market environments as different operational teams. What are like 3 risks that are material to ABTC over the next 12 months? And how are you hedging them if they're policy, insurance, financial, ops related, knowing that you have a lot of I guess, success and learnings under your belt already, why are you viewed as a seasoned operator versus a new Bitcoin mining company?
On the Bitcoin side, so taking the accumulation and breaking it down into mining in this specific case, there are three areas that I'm always checking the dials on to see what our risk tolerance is, right? The first is energy, the second is global capital markets, and the third is public policy. So first, talking about energy, Bitcoin mining, again, only part of our business. We're also got a treasury vehicle in operation. But on the mining side, we are exposed to energy prices. So we are constantly thinking about our energy rates, our machine efficiencies, the markets that we want to expand into. What does the future of global energy look like in a year? What does energy look like at the state level, the local level, the federal level, the international level? It comes down to the electron. And that is why, for us, having this Hut 8 relationship is fantastic. With a pipeline into gigawatts, with an experienced team of energy operators around the world now, we got a perspective on energy that is fairly mature, right? It puts us in the league of many of these large-scale energy producers, more so than a small mining shop, right? And so on the energy side, I think the increased adoption of renewables has created some volatility around energy. Miners have always excelled in volatile energy environments. We curtail, we can speed up, we can speed down, we can adjust efficiencies. And we've proven ourselves quite adept at that. But the first risk bucket, I would say, is energy. The second risk bucket that everyone should be thinking about when it comes to accumulation beyond mining, this applies to treasury overall, is going to be capital markets, right? What is your cost of capital? How much does money cost? That's the billion, if not trillion-dollar question. So this is where I spend a lot of time looking at reports. I look at the CPI. I look at all the inflation metrics. I think about the Fed meetings. I read their remarks. I've done a lot of global macro work in past life. And I find myself actually really channeling that now, thinking about what do capital markets look like this week, this month, this quarter, this year, next year, because it impacts our business, both from the performance of our equity, which is public, as well as the performance of our cost of capital, right? If we want to get into development, if we want to do things like that, what is the money going to cost? So that is a bucket that I'm very attentive to as well. The third final bucket of risk that we should talk about is politics. Right? There's an old line that you may not be interested in politics, but politics are very interested in you. Mining and Bitcoin in general are now at that scale. We are no longer a bunch of gentlemen in our basements mining coin and securing the network. We are industrial power consumers, and that has attained a lot of interest, or you might say curiosity, from policymakers, again, at the local, state, federal, and international level. And so for us to perform well, we need the chakras to align politically across these different groups. The current administration has been a tremendous sea change for the cryptocurrency industry. We have our first Bitcoin president. We've got a team of very capable folks on the energy side. We've got a team of capable folks in the financial side, the SEC, the Fed groups like that. They're attentive to the markets. They want to be supportive. Always a bit of a shock when I meet with these policymakers and they say things like, how can I be helpful? That is fantastic. That is really what you want to hear when you're building a business in the United States. The policymakers are asking how they can help you. So the policy risk is still real. We have to be constantly doing education. There are, if you add up all the senators and the congressmen, hundreds of people, and not all of them are yet orange pilled, but they're getting there one congressional session at a time. So meeting with regulators, meeting with representatives, and then at the state level, meeting with folks in that government. The states kind of bridge some of the high level federal policy and the local politics. It's really important to engage with the different states, ensure Bitcoin is protected. And then at the local level, you get into things like zoning, you get into things like permits. And for our very tangible mining assets, it's very important that we stay in close contact with our communities, we engage them. And again, we do a lot of education. So when it comes to the political risk, education to me is one of the most important parts of ensuring that we are not caught offsides with the regulators.
And Matt, I think you highlighted one thing we really haven't talked about, but I would love to hear more insight into in color, which is the relationship ABTC has with Eric Trump. Now, how did it come about? And what was this $2.1 billion raise? How did that work? How did that look? How many dinners at Mar-a-Lago you had? Let's give me some of the juicy details.
Yeah. So taking a step back, we co-founded this company. Eric Trump is one of the co-founders of the management team. We've got Dodd Jr. as an investor as well. So we've got involvement from both of them. This relationship started a while back. Right? My partner, Mike, had met Eric at a conference. They'd started a discussion. You have to understand that Eric's superpower, his background, a lot of it's been in real estate, right? I mean, the Trump organization has done tremendous amounts of development all over the world, right? And when you come into Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining specifically, there's actually a lot of carryover from the real estate world into what we do. In a sense, we're doing commercial real estate, industrial real estate, 10X, with the express purposes of the energy bill. His line item of building a Trump organization property, he's got 1,000 items or 1,000 things that he's worried about. For us, we need to make sure that there's a lot going on there too, but it's really the energy bill is where the rubber meets the road in Bitcoin mining. So when Eric got looped in with the team, a lot of really productive conversations happened around the real estate side, around data centers as well, something that they were very interested in, around Bitcoin as this tremendous asset that's growing double-digit percentage every year, and how to best gain exposure to that. And the thing with Bitcoin, and as someone who's done mining, and you've done mining as well, is why buy it when you can make it, right? The only way to accumulate Bitcoin at a structural discount is through mining. So that's a great place to start if you want to build a category leader in the Bitcoin ecosystem. With Eric joining, we brought him aboard, co-founded the company, trying to find the ways that we could best channel his superpowers in the capital markets, in communication, in articulating our mission, our vision, and really just demonstrating how serious we are about building a marquee business here in the United States. Right? Having a member of the First Family involved, he's a private businessman. It's not overlap. He's a private citizen, but he articulates the American story so well that for us, it's a no-brainer to find ways to work together and create the marquee organization, combining the operational execution ability of Hot 8 and the sort of brand articulation and strategic mindset from Eric Trump. So that led to the company, formally launched in April 1. He's actively involved in the business. We're speaking constantly. You'll see him around. You'll see him go on podcasts. You'll see him in the media, but you really also see him behind closed doors, right? This is a relationship that extends far beyond just the sound bites, and he's been a great partner to have.
And I mean, a great partner bringing together a bunch of amazing people. I mean, I saw a photo of you and him and Brian Johnson. I mean, how was that meeting? Was that a party? Was that a planning session? Talk to me more about that photo with the team there.
Every good planning session turns into a party at the end of the day. But the reality for us is that we want to build a brand people get excited about. Bitcoin, it's a $2 trillion jump ball. There's an anonymous founder. There's tons of great teams working on interesting aspects of it. People doing the DeFi, people updating the development code, people working on the energy arbitrage. Bitcoin it's like the story of the blind man feeling the elephant. It's a little different to everybody, right? But for us, Bitcoin is an exciting American story. It combines self-sovereignty, it combines freedom, it combines hard work. All of these are core American values wrapped into a new currency, a way for folks to exit from the fiat ecosystem. Bitcoin really represents something that to me is very quintessentially American. So as we think about what we want to do to engage people, we're going above and beyond just the crypto community. I love speaking to the crypto community. I'm from the crypto community. At a certain point, though, you are preaching to the converted, right? And you need to go out there. And if we want to become a multi-trillion-dollar asset, if we want to become a global reserve store value, you need to find new groups of people to get excited about the story on their terms. And so to the photo you're referencing, you see folks like Eric Trump, myself, Brian Johnson in there. Who knows more about compounding than Brian Johnson? I mean, the man wants to live forever, right? And so if you're living forever, compounding is going to do a lot of good financially. And so we brought in all kinds of interesting folks to hear about the story and to potentially get involved in different ways. It starts with the meeting. It starts with, again, education. There are a lot of conversations that need to be had to get Bitcoin to be the asset that we all want it to be. But they're going to involve folks that you wouldn't necessarily expect day one. You would be surprised. I've spoken about Bitcoin from everybody from country singers to folks that are working in Walmart, to central bankers, to sovereign wealth. There is something in the Bitcoin story for everybody. And so as you think about the industry, not surprisingly, you're going to see more and more photos of more and more unique groups of people with strange bedfellows, but Bitcoin uniting us all.
And let's kind of end on this marketing question. So ABTC, you've sponsored some conferences, the Wyoming one and a few other ones. What is the marketing strategy? Do you have anything that is out of the box, or is it, to your point, get people in different verticals that have an audience, tell them the story, share with them the vision, and get them on the team?
Brand matters. So as we build American Bitcoin into a great company, to me, being part of being a great company is having a great brand. And you can have a great brand operationally. You can have a great track record. You can be proud of what you do and how you build and how quickly you operate and your discounts. But you also want people to kind of wear the brand on the sleeve, right? There's some benefit to having almost a lifestyle aspect to your business, to having a story people want to get involved with. At the end of the day, every good business to me is a good story. So while we were building American Bitcoin, we're always thinking about how does this tie into all sorts of other stories. There's the story of a store value. There's the story of transactions. There's the story of self-sovereignty and freedom. And so it creates a lot of opportunities for us to engage above and beyond crypto. You've seen us at conferences. We're very active. We're a marquee brand in Bitcoin industry that's only going to grow. But you may start to see us in places that are actually not crypto native. And that's okay, because similar to you, I was not crypto native when I first came to the industry. I had to learn, same as everyone else. It's about getting folks off of zero, and having a great brand is a fantastic way to get people curious. Wearing a ABTC hat at the airport and having folks say, hey, I've seen you on Robin. What are you wearing there? And telling that story, that conversation never gets old. And to me, the story of Bitcoin is a story of successive conversations. And so if we can spark more conversations around American Bitcoin and what we bring to the table, the better off the industry will be.
So I love it. What's the ASIC you got behind you?
Oh, this is vintage. This is an old Force and my behind me, that's 9. Yeah, we're proud of our roots, right? You've got obviously the Minecraft pickaxe diamond, of course, got to be the elite, but we need to be proud of where we've come from as an industry. Like every industry, Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining have heritage. And that's sort of heritage that we want to bring you to the brand story. Yes, we'll go do TradFi, and there's much better things to come in the Bitcoin ecosystem, but we're not going to forget our roots.
No, and I want to do a quick rapid fire question with you, Matt.
Please.
Just coming out of necessarily the ABTC CEO hat, more into just Matt himself. So here's some quick questions to run through. First one is, what book do you think every Bitcoin investor should read that's not a Bitcoin book?
Every Bitcoiner should read the book The True Believer by Eric Hoffer. And the reason why is Eric Hoffer was a philosopher with a good understanding of psychology who wrote extensively around mass movements. And Bitcoin to me is a mass movement. It's a great mass movement. It's a mass movement for good. It's a mass movement for economic security. But if you want to understand Bitcoin, you can't just understand the economics. The economics in Bitcoin are super important, but you also need to understand belief and what it takes to truly have conviction in something. And so I find so many lessons from psychology. Bitcoin exists in this sort of Venn diagram between two of humanity's oldest technologies, currency and religion. And with Bitcoin's fervor, you see the sparkle in people's eyes. It is a mass movement. And so the book, The True Believer by Eric Hoffer, is a fantastic way to learn more about the psychology of what it takes to get people excited.
I'll definitely have to check that out. That sounds exciting. What's your favorite way to recharge outside of work?
Outside of work to unwind, I love to read. I love to read because those lessons can be applied back to the workplace, but it actually goes the other way as well. There's stuff that I may be struggling with in work, new problems we're trying to untangle. And there are so many lessons I get from other thinkers and other writers. We may be dealing with new combinations of old problems, but the story of the economy is not new. The story of belief is not new. And so for me, reading is such an enriching way to live a more textured life. I'm already living my life. I might as well just go from an inch deep to a mile deep on the topics I love and get more out of it. And reading's been a great way to blow off some steam.
Definitely agree on that. If you weren't in Bitcoin mining, what industry would you be in today?
If I were not in Bitcoin mining, and I cannot be in energy technology, and I can't be doing things with energy development, which is something else I love, I would be very interested in robotics. And the reason why I think robotics is so interesting is because you're turning electricity into labor. And it's been fascinating to see with Bitcoin, electricity being turned into currency, and with AI, seeing electricity being turned into intelligence. But the next wave I foresee is going to be turning electricity directly into labor. And that is going to open up all sorts of fascinating new industries. It's going to create tremendous opportunity to build infrastructure, to manufacture things at scales we've never seen before. And so for me, robotics is a fascinating area.
Can't wait to have those mining techs be robots. It's coming. What's the most memorable place you visited thanks to Bitcoin or Bitcoin mining?
Part of building a successful business is to go anywhere and do anything that you really believe is going to responsibly create value for the shareholders. And so a few years ago, I was on a quest to find the best electrical engineering technologies I could for our business. And in the process of chasing down some new electric cables, I actually found myself in the Arctic Circle. Finland, believe it or not, has a fantastic culture of engineering and science. Obviously, it's the birthplace of Nokia. So there's tremendous technology in Finland, of all places. And I found myself in the Arctic Circle in Yle, which is northern Finland, with a Bitcoin miner under each arm, meeting with some very smart Finnish scientists talking about electrical current. Now, the technology is still too early, so I won't get into the details of their projects, but I will go anywhere and meet with anybody that will find ways to deliver energy efficiently. To me, it's a fascinating opportunity for us, and it is taking me to some unexpected places.
No, I love that. It's the travel around the world for the cheap electron, usually with Bitcoin miners. What's a habit or routine that keeps you sharp under pressure?
When I'm under pressure, I actually think a lot about cooking. Cooking is a funny thing because it's creative. It's a way to express yourself. There's a reward at the end, hopefully, if you do a good job with your cooking. But there's a lot of time pressure in cooking. There's a lot of things going on at once. You're almost literally spinning a lot of plates. Things are on fire, or hopefully not too on fire, but you're doing a lot in cooking to make sure that the results are good. So for me, I think I actually take a lot of lessons from cooking into building companies, right? In cooking, there's something called mise en place, how you set up your station before you start work. It's very important in cooking. You don't want to be halfway through a recipe, things are boiling, other things are in the oven. You don't want to be cooking and not know where your knife is. It would be very bad. And so for me, as I think about starting my workday, I actually put a lot of thought in to make sure that my caffeine is not too far out of arm's reach. I love a good cup of coffee or two or three, right? My phone is nearby, so I'm not totally ignoring that either. But that everything is really set up so that I'm able to operate under pressure and deliver results for folks.
I love it. I love it. Cooking is something that I'm getting into, but I'm still just the eggs guy every morning for breakfast and coffee. You get that staple breakfast, right?
Do you know the story about the eggs? There's an apocryphal story about how the chef's hat with the ruffles. In each fold of the wet chef's hat supposed to represent a different way you can prepare eggs. So I think you've got plenty going on there.
I didn't know that. Okay, two more. What's one piece of advice you give your younger self before entering the Bitcoin space as you were slaving away as a consultant?
Advice I would give my younger self entering the Bitcoin space, it would be never stop learning. You're never going to master everything in your area, but there's always going to be new things to learn as well. So get good at what you're doing. Bring your weaknesses up to par. Don't let your weaknesses override your ability to focus on your strengths. But you don't need to be the best at your worst trait. You want to spend time leveling up your weaknesses, whether it's making sure you're in a structured enough environment, whether it's making sure you're a good interviewer. There are skills you want to get up to par. Once you're up to par, focus on your strengths. Be spiky in what you enjoy. It's way more fun than trying to get above average and things you're not good at. But definitely get the skill sets that are you're rusty up to par. And so if I were talking to younger Matt, I would say, hey, get those basics, get that financial modeling up to par. Maybe your financial modeling skills, you're not a macros guy. You're savvy with Excel, but you don't need to be a savant. Get that up to par and then really focus on what makes you excited.
So what are your strengths, Matt?
I think my strengths are urgency, speed, or working with folks on new projects. And so I think when you combine speed and curiosity, you see things happening and you ask, why is that happening? And then you sprint towards making sure it can happen even better. I think that's a skill set that I've really enjoyed. I mean, cryptocurrency and Bitcoin accumulation, mining, treasury, we've had that opportunity. 6 months ago, treasuries were very, very new. It was really Michael Saylor against the world, building out a new category of assets. That was something that made me intensely curious. And then with a fantastic team, Asher, Mike from Hut as well, being able to sprint together towards that new opportunity, that is something, I don't know if it's a superpower, but it's something that I enjoy.
No, it's amazing. I think you guys have done a great job getting to the finish line of going public in a very short order. So congrats to you and the team. And last question is, Matt, what's one word you would use to describe American Bitcoin in 2025?
Track record. We'll make that one word. Compound now. The reason why I say track record is because with American Bitcoin, you're combining the Hut 8 track record, operational excellence, ruthless cost efficiencies, focus on scale. There's a production superpower over there. And you're combining that track record with this Bitcoin treasury track record, which we're still building. And that's something you're going to see week after week, month after month. So we've got the track record from the past, which is great on the operations side. And you're going to see the new track record going forward on the accumulation side. And that is a way that I think we're really going to stand out.
Well, I can't wait to see the ABTC tracker, the Bitcoin tracker, and
it's coming.
All the orange dots on the screen as Michael Saylor has kind of pioneered. Well, thank you again, Matt, for coming on the podcast today. I appreciate you sharing a little bit more insight into this newly formed American Bitcoin company, one of the biggest and best miners to come. And remember, guys, to mine on.